I got a promotion after 6 years, only to find a 22-year-old new hire was making double my salary. When I asked for a fair raise, my manager said I have kept you out of pity for all these years. You owe me for your career. Okay, I said. He didn't know I decided to. Pity, Greg said, leaning back in his chair like he just explained gravity to a child. That's the only reason you're still here. 6 years of carrying you, and now you want more money? He laughed through his nose. You should be thanking me for your career, not asking for handouts. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. His office smelled like stale coffee and the fake leather of his executive chair. On his desk, a framed photo of his boat. Behind him, a motivational poster about eagles. I held the paper in my hand, the one I'd found in the printer that morning. The new hire's offer letter. 22 years old, fresh out of college, starting at $118,000. My salary, after 6 years and a promotion last month, was $54,000. I'm not asking for a handout, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm asking why someone with no experience is making more than double what I make. Greg waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. Market rates. You wouldn't understand. That kid has skills we need. He pointed at me. You? You were a warm body when I hired you. I took a chance. I gave you everything. And now you come in here demanding things? He shook his head. This is the thanks I get. I looked at him for a long moment. His jaw was set. His eyes had that particular shine people get when they believe their own mythology. Okay, I said. Okay? He blinked. Okay. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. Thanks for explaining it. He smiled, victorious. Good. Now get back to work. We've got the Henderson project due Friday. I walked out of his office and closed the door behind me. They'd been pulling this kind of thing for years. Not just Greg, though Greg was the worst of them, but the whole company. Meridian Solutions had a particular talent for making people feel grateful for scraps. I'd watched it happen to others. The quiet conversations in the parking lot. The resignation letters that appeared without warning. The way HR smiled and nodded and never actually fixed anything. When I started, I was 26 and desperate. Student loans, a car that barely ran, a lease I could barely afford. Greg interviewed me himself and made a big show of taking a chance on someone without the traditional background. I taught myself most of what I knew about data systems. Self-taught meant cheap, and Greg loved cheap. For 6 years, I'd believed the story he told. That I was lucky to be there. That my lack of formal credentials meant I should accept less. That the promotions would come eventually, and the money would follow. The promotions came. 3 of them. Each one with a title change and a 4% raise that barely covered inflation. Each one with more responsibility. More hours. More projects that somehow only I could handle. I built their entire client database architecture. I created the reporting systems that let them land contracts worth millions. I trained every new hire in my department, including, 3 weeks ago, a 22-year-old named Marcus who asked me how to do a basic SQL query on his second day. Marcus, whose offer letter I'd found in the printer because he'd accidentally hit print on the wrong machine. Marcus, who made $118,000 to learn things I'd mastered years ago. I didn't go back to my desk. I went to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. The first call was to my wife, Rachel. Hey, you okay? She could always hear it in my voice. Greg just told me I should be grateful he kept me out of pity. A long pause. He said what? I found out the new kid makes more than double my salary. When I asked about it, Greg said I owe him my career. That he's been carrying me for 6 years. That absolute. She stopped herself. What are you going to do? I'm going to handle it. What does that mean? It means I'll be home for dinner. Don't worry. I hung up before she could ask more questions. The second call was to my friend Tony, who worked in employment law. Hypothetically, I said when he answered, if someone discovered a massive pay disparity at their company, and they had documentation, and they wanted to understand their options. Are we talking gender discrimination? Race? Age, maybe, experience-based. I'm not sure what category it falls into, but I've got an offer letter showing a new hire with 0 experience making more than double what I make after 6 years. Tony whistled low. That's not illegal on its own, unfortunately. Companies can pay whatever they want for the most part. But if there's a pattern, or if they're violating their own policies, or if there's retaliation, that's different. He paused. You still have access to your company systems? I do. Might want to take a look at those policies. And document everything you've built there. Everything you've contributed. Make copies of your own work, nothing proprietary, just proof of what you've done. Already ahead of you on that. Smart. Call me if it escalates. I went back inside, but not to work. I went to the break room, poured myself a cup of terrible coffee, and sat down at the corner table where the employee handbook lived in a 3-ring binder that nobody ever touched. Page 47. Compensation Philosophy. Meridian Solutions is committed to fair and equitable compensation based on experience, performance, and market rates. Employees in similar roles with similar experience levels will be compensated comparably, regardless of tenure. I photographed that page. Page 62. Anti-retaliation policy. No employee shall face adverse action for raising good faith concerns about compensation, workplace conditions, or company policies. I photographed that too. Then I went to my computer and started downloading. Not company data. My own data. Every email I'd sent. Every project plan I'd created. Every system I'd designed. Every client relationship I'd built. Everything that documented 6 years of work that Greg called carrying me. By 4:30, I had everything backed up to my personal cloud. 312 files. A complete record of everything I contributed to Meridian Solutions since my first day. At 4:45, I sent an email. TO, HR Department. CC, Greg Morrison, Regional Director, Legal Compliance. Subject, Formal Compensation Review Request. To whom it may concern. I am formally requesting a compensation review in accordance with Company Policy 4.7.2, Pay Equity Review Process. I have documentation suggesting significant pay disparities between employees in similar roles with similar responsibilities. Additionally, I wish to document a conversation that occurred today in which my direct supervisor, Greg Morrison, stated that I have been employed out of pity and that I owe him my career. I am concerned this statement reflects bias that may have influenced my compensation history. I am requesting a meeting with HR within 5 business days to discuss these concerns and review my compensation history against stated company policies. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I hit send at 4:48 p.m. At 4:52 p.m., Greg appeared at my cubicle, his face the color of a ripe tomato. My office, now. He didn't bother closing the door this time. He wanted witnesses. What the hell do you think you're doing? He slammed a printed copy of my email on his desk. You CC'd legal? On a complaint about me? I followed the process in the handbook, I said. Page 62. You went over my head. After everything I've done for you. You told me I should be grateful. I wanted to make sure gratitude was documented. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. You think you're clever? You think this changes anything? HR works for me. Legal works for me. This whole damn floor works for me. Then you shouldn't have any problem with the review. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to something that was probably supposed to be menacing. Listen to me very carefully. You can withdraw that email right now, apologize, and we forget this ever happened. Or you can find out what happens to people who try to make me look bad. I looked at him. 47 years old. Regional Director. 23 years at the company. A man who'd built his entire identity around the power he held over people like me. I'm not withdrawing anything, I said. Then you're done here. He smiled. Not today, that would look bad. But soon. I'll find a reason. I always do. Thanks for documenting that, I said. His smile faltered. What? I pulled out my phone and stopped the voice recording I'd started the moment he called me into his office. Retaliation threat, I said. That's going to be really helpful. The next 72 hours were educational. HR called me first thing the next morning. A woman named Patricia with a carefully neutral voice and a legal pad full of questions. She asked about my email. She asked about my conversation with Greg. She asked if I understood the seriousness of what I was alleging. I understand it completely, I said. We take these matters very seriously, she assured me. I know. That's why I put it in writing. She scheduled a formal meeting for Friday. Greg, meanwhile, had apparently received coaching from someone with a functioning brain. He avoided me entirely on Tuesday. On Wednesday, he sent a company-wide email about professional communication standards and the importance of following chain of command. On Thursday, he pulled the new kid, Marcus, into his office for 2 hours. Marcus came out looking pale. You okay? I asked him in the hallway. He looked at me like I was radioactive. I can't talk to you. Greg tell you that? He didn't answer. He just walked away. Friday's meeting was in the big conference room. The one with the mahogany table and the portraits of company founders on the walls. Patricia was there, along with 2 people from legal I'd never seen before, and a man who introduced himself as David Chen, Vice President of People Operations. Greg wasn't there. Interesting. We've reviewed your concerns, David said, folding his hands on the table. We want you to know that Meridian Solutions takes pay equity very seriously. I'm glad to hear that. We've also listened to the recording you provided. He cleared his throat. Mr. Morrison's comments were not consistent with our values. No, I agreed. They weren't. We'd like to offer you a resolution. A salary adjustment to bring you in line with market rates, retroactive for the current calendar year. And a formal apology from Mr. Morrison. How much of an adjustment? Patricia slid a paper across the table. $74,000. Plus a signing bonus of $20,000 for the inconvenience. It was a bribe. A generous one, but a bribe nonetheless. And in exchange? We'd ask you to sign a confidentiality agreement regarding this matter. And to withdraw your formal complaint. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at David Chen, with his expensive tie and his practice smile. Can I have the weekend to think about it? He nodded. Of course. Take until Monday. I spent Saturday doing research. Not on Meridian. On myself. For 6 years, I'd built systems that held the company together. I knew where every piece of data lived. I knew which clients depended on my architecture. I knew which projects would collapse without my institutional knowledge. I also knew what I was worth on the open market. I made some calls. Reached out to a few recruiters I'd ignored over the years. Asked some questions. Got some answers. By Saturday night, I had 3 preliminary offers, all north of $130,000. One included a signing bonus and equity. Sunday morning, I made a different kind of call. Tony, I said. What would it take to file a formal complaint with the Department of Labor? About pay disparity? About a pattern of pay disparity. And documented retaliation. And whatever else I can prove. He was quiet for a moment. You're not taking their deal? Their deal comes with silence. I'm not interested in silence anymore. This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly. I'm just making it visible. Monday morning, I walked into David Chen's office at 8:15 a.m. He was expecting me to sign papers. I was carrying different papers instead. I've decided not to accept your offer, I said. His smile flickered. I'm sorry to hear that. Can I ask why? Because $74,000 is still $30,000 less than you're paying someone with no experience. Because your confidentiality agreement exists to protect the people who created this problem, not the people it harmed. And because I have reason to believe I'm not the only employee you've underpaid while telling them they should be grateful. That's a serious allegation. Yes. It is. I set my resignation letter on his desk. Effective immediately. I've also filed a complaint with the Department of Labor. And I've reached out to 3 current employees who I believe may have similar experiences to mine. David's practiced calm cracked slightly. You've been talking to other employees? About our shared experiences, yes. That's protected activity under federal labor law. You can look it up. He picked up the phone. Patricia, I need you in my office, now. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal threats and damage control. Patricia tried to remind me of my non-disclosure agreements. I reminded her that whistleblower protections superseded corporate NDAs when it came to reporting potential labor violations. David tried to explain that this could damage my career. I explained that my career had already been damaged by 6 years of artificial salary suppression. Greg showed up at some point, summoned from whatever rock he'd been hiding under. He stood in the doorway with murder in his eyes but didn't say a word. Someone must have told him that anything he said could end up in another recording. At 10:30 a.m., I walked out of Meridian Solutions for the last time. I left my badge at the front desk. I didn't look back. The Department of Labor complaint triggered an investigation. Not because of me specifically, one complaint rarely does, but because 3 of my former colleagues had filed similar complaints within 24 hours of mine. Then 2 more the following week. It turned out I wasn't the only one Greg had kept around out of pity. There was Sandra, who'd been told she was lucky to have a job at all after coming back from maternity leave. There was Michael, who'd been told his communication style didn't justify higher pay, which everyone understood to be code for his accent. There was Dana, who'd been told that as a single person without kids, she didn't need as much money as her colleagues. 6 employees. 6 similar stories. 6 years of documentation between us. The investigation took 4 months. I wasn't involved in most of it. I was too busy starting my new job, which paid $142,000 and didn't require me to train people who made more than me. But I heard things. From former colleagues. From industry contacts. From Tony, who tracked the case with professional interest. Greg was placed on administrative leave after the 2nd month. By the 3rd month, 3 other managers were under investigation for similar practices. By the 4th month, Meridian Solutions had hired an outside consulting firm to conduct a comprehensive pay equity audit. The results of that audit were never made public. But the remediation costs were $800,000 in salary adjustments for current employees, another $300,000 in back pay for former employees, and an undisclosed settlement for a class action lawsuit that emerged from the federal investigation. Greg was quietly terminated in month 5. No announcement. No farewell party. One day his name was on the company directory, and the next day it wasn't. I heard through the grapevine that he'd tried to get a job at a competitor. Someone there had called Meridian for a reference. I don't know what was said, but he didn't get the job. Rachel asked me once if I felt guilty. About Greg. About how it all ended up. He lost his job, she said. His career, probably. That's pretty severe. I thought about it for a minute. The humming fluorescent lights. The smell of stale coffee. The framed photo of his boat. The way he'd smiled when he thought I was going to back down. He told me I owed him my career, I said. For 6 years, I believed him. I worked late. I took on extra projects. I trained his new hires. I made him look good. And the whole time, he was paying me half of what he paid people who couldn't do what I could do. But still. If you find out someone's been stealing from you for 6 years, you don't feel guilty when they get caught. You feel angry that it took so long. She didn't bring it up again. The new job was different in ways I hadn't expected. Not just the salary, though that mattered. It was the way people treated each other. The way information flowed openly. The way my manager, a woman named Eileen, would ask for my input and actually use it. A few months in, I brought up an idea for improving one of our systems. Something similar to what I'd built at Meridian, but better. Eileen nodded. Write up a proposal. If it makes sense, we'll fund it. And if it works, you'll own it. Own it? Your project, your credit. That's how things work here. I sat in my new office, an actual office, with a door, and wrote the proposal. It took me 2 weeks. Eileen approved it in 3 days. 6 months later, the system I built was handling 40% of our client operations. My name was on it. My contribution was documented. When review time came around, there was no guessing about what I'd accomplished. They gave me a 15% raise without me having to ask. A year after I left Meridian, I got a LinkedIn message. It was from Marcus, the 22-year-old who'd been making $118,000 to do a job he couldn't do. "Hey," he wrote. "I know this is out of nowhere, but I wanted to apologize for how everything went down. I didn't know about the pay stuff until after you left. When I found out, I was pretty shocked." I stared at the message for a while. Then I wrote back. "You didn't do anything wrong. You were just a kid who accepted a good offer. That's what you're supposed to do." Still feels weird. They laid me off 6 months ago. Budget cuts, they said. But I think it was because of all the attention on the salary stuff. Where are you now? Looking. It's tough. My skills aren't where they should be for someone at my experience level on paper, if that makes sense. I thought about Greg. About all the people he'd harmed, not just the ones he underpaid, but the ones he overpaid too. The ones he set up to fail because they were never given a chance to learn properly. The ones who became symbols of everything wrong with the system. "Send me your resume," I wrote. "I know some people." 2 years later, I ran into Greg at a conference. He'd found work eventually, a consulting gig at a smaller firm, nothing like his old title. He looked older, grayer. The confidence that had seemed unshakable was visibly cracked. He saw me from across the room. For a moment, I thought he might come over. Say something. Try to explain, or accuse, or apologize. Instead, he turned and walked the other way. I watched him go. Then I finished my coffee and went back to my presentation. The thing about people like Greg is that they believe in their own mythology. They tell themselves stories about how they're the heroes. How they're helping people. How everyone who works for them should be grateful for the opportunity. And for a long time, those stories work. Because the people they're telling them to are too desperate, or too scared, or too beaten down to question them. But stories only have power if you believe them. The moment you stop believing, the moment you start documenting, the moment you decide that okay doesn't mean I accept this, that's when everything changes. Greg thought okay meant I'd given up. He thought I was going to slink back to my desk and keep generating value for him while he took credit and kept me poor. He didn't know I'd already decided. Decided that I was worth more than his pity. Decided that my work had value, even if he'd spent 6 years telling me it didn't. Decided that the only person who owed anybody anything was him. And that I was going to make sure he paid. Last month, I got promoted again. Vice President of Data Architecture. Salary, $210,000, plus equity. Eileen, now the COO, made the announcement at a company meeting. She talked about my contributions. My systems. My mentorship of junior employees. She used my actual name. Afterward, a young analyst came up to me. 23 years old, fresh out of school, nervous as hell. "Is it true you built the whole client architecture yourself?" she asked. "Mostly," I said. "Why?" "I'm just wondering. How do you know when you're being treated fairly? When you're new, everyone says you're lucky to be here, you should be grateful, all that stuff. How do you know if it's true?" I thought about the question. About the fluorescent lights and the stale coffee and the framed boat picture. "It's never true," I said. "Not the way they mean it. You're not lucky to be somewhere that needed to hire you. They're not doing you a favor by paying you for work. If someone tells you that you owe them for your job, they're telling you something about themselves, not about you." She nodded slowly. "Document everything," I added. "Know your worth. And if they tell you you should be grateful, start looking." 3 years since I walked out of Meridian Solutions. Greg's consulting gig didn't last. I heard he's selling insurance now. Marcus got a job at a startup I recommended him to. He's doing well. Actually learning things this time. Sandra, Michael, and Dana all found better positions. The settlements helped. The vindication helped more. The Meridian Solutions pay equity audit became a case study at 2 different business schools. How not to manage compensation was the general theme. And me? I'm building things. Real things, with my name on them. At a company that pays me what I'm worth and doesn't pretend it's doing me a favor. Every once in a while, I think about that moment in Greg's office. The humming lights. The motivational poster about eagles. The way he smiled when he thought he'd won. Okay, I'd said. He never understood what that word meant. He thought it meant surrender. He thought it meant acceptance. But okay is what you say when you're done arguing. When you've made a decision and there's nothing left to discuss. When you're about to act instead of talk. Okay is the last word before everything changes. I said okay. And then I burned his world to the ground. He just didn't know it yet.